Welcome to Video Game Animation Study, where we study the animation in video games. My name's Dan, and this time we're going to take a look at the 2012 indie game Fez, and have a little look at just how this deep, interesting puzzle game's world feels alive through its animated elements, what this achieves, and why it's important. Aside from its interesting, perspective-shifting gimmick and sublime soundtrack by Rich Reland, Fez has an abundance of animated goodies to enjoy, which is the structure of this rich space, and the balance to the hefty themes of the game. In my keyframes episode, I've spoken about how limited memory and such prevents 8-bit animation from being fully fleshed out, having to resort to keyframe animation, essentially. This limitation has become an art style in its own right, particularly in the last decade. Fez's retro-inspired 8-bit aesthetics have given it an opportunity to really push this idea further, and you'll notice there's this micro-animation in many background places in the game, from birds and cats to worms and turtles. Just before we get to the animation part, I'll just cover a few things first. I believe there's a specific reason Fez pushes its simplistic art style to the limits, which I'll get to later on. Also, Fez does this thing where it'll zoom in or out on a stage depending how big it is and where the focus needs to be, so the actual detail you see in the characters and stage design varies, but the scale of the character's definition remains relative to the zoom. It just means that even if you get real close to Gomez here, he won't appear any clearer, he'll just look even less detailed. So if we consider that all characters are this size most of the time, we get an idea of how intricate everything is. Our main character Gomez himself has a decent amount of appeal to his movements. They're quite slow and light-hearted, bouncy, cute, simple and effective. Frame rate for the character animation itself is probably somewhere around 10 to 16 frames per second, meaning it has to be concise, not quite keyframe concise, but all the groundwork for movement needs to be achieved in as few frames as possible. So Gomez has a nice 6-frame run cycle, a few frames for jumping, including anticipation, a nice amount for this stop and turn here, and he has a really cute set of idle animations and action performing movements. So we get to Fez's rich environments. Most areas in the game have some sort of movement, whether it's just a simple water flow, some rain, or even just cloud shadows that add a bit of texture to when you move through the area. I personally find the main hub worlds, which have many doors and portals to other areas, to have the richest design in terms of animation. Even then, there are some great examples in more cornered off sections which have such lovely visuals. For instance, the lighthouse. Different areas in the game portray a different mood. The lighthouse and surrounding areas are meant to be serene. The soundtrack is a beautiful calm melody, the sky changes from blue to orange to pink to purple and back round again as the day goes on. The water is reflecting back up to the stage platform, and right here is a little collection of utter bloody loveliness. We have a cat that's playing with a butterfly, bending down, ready to pounce, only to jump up and miss, with the butterfly just casually doing loops. All in all, there's probably less than 20 frames, but there's a whole tiny story portrayed in that amount of time, and it's just a bit of background filler essentially. Then right here we've got a happy little worm or caterpillar just pacing up and down this platform, moving by performing that undulating Mexican wave they do. Then over here we've got a little toad or frog who's just hopping up and down this bit, stopping occasionally to ribbit. And he'll react to you if you go near him, which shows that these background pieces of animation are actually there and not just on a loop. You're there in that space with them. If you can interact with these seemingly background pieces of animation, then that means they inhabit this space as well, meaning this space is alive. And then here on the tree we've got a seagull who hops up and down, stopping periodically to give out a call. It's the way he squashes and stretches that I love, just a lovely bouncy movement that speaks nothing other than innocence. I love it. Zipping back across the map, we have this rainy, nocturnal city looking area. Now, while there's not an awful lot going on, there's still activity that spruces up what is essentially a really short dead end designed for rounding up the game's goal pieces, these little golden cubes. You've got your classic seagull back again, you've got these little rats running back and forth, you've got the rain splashing on the floor, you've got lightning, and you've got the neon lights that flicker from lack of maintenance. It's a melancholy little area, backed up with all this rich environmental aesthetics, but there's something about there being rain that saves this area from feeling too empty. There's a sort of comfort that's present, like how you'd watch a summer storm from your bedroom window. Back across the map to the forest, and we've got this cute little scene. The thing to note here, in particular, is this classic English sentence depicted in a little animated tableau: "The quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog." The purpose for this is to learn Fez's alphabet, but the way it's done is super subtle yet simple and concise. There's a lot of detail to small things like the anticipation of when the fox jumps, the fox's turn once he lands, and how the dog shuffles across to watch him jump. Elsewhere around the world, we have bunnies hopping around with their flapping ears, bits of grass and flowers that dance in the wind, other types of birds and bugs that fly and crawl, little torches with fire, and we have waterfalls that pour into the lake below, creating a slow but mesmerising square splash, while the flow itself is portrayed as an undulating square wave. It's interesting to note, actually, that the whole world is built using this square structure, and not just because it's a pixel-styled art, but even in larger structures where a rough circular shape would be easier to portray. Even things like tree roots, trunks, and bells are retained to right angles. This is probably because it's easier for the camera to rotate around square structures than round ones. All the while, these square creations can still subtly obey the principles of animation, like squash and stretch, anticipation, overlapping, timing, and many others. Admittedly, there are places when there's actually not a lot going on in Fez. There's little movement. Either plants are still, there aren't many animals, or there aren't even any clouds or water. Personally, I'll chalk this up to the area being a deliberately more still area, as the architecture kinda signals ruins. So stillness kinda conjures up a museum sort of vibe, and you don't want to be distracted at museums. They're thinky places. All the same, I refer back to my original comment on the hub worlds being the richest areas in the game. I find they employ most or many of the techniques seen in other areas, such as animal activity and natural elements, and when they're all viewed together, it looks great. It really looks like the world is alive, especially in these two areas, the beginning of the game and the ending of the game, sort of. When you have other characters running around the game world as well, seeing their presence in this already animated world just pushes the depth even more, and you get a real, genuine sense that these little guys spend their days tinkering in this space. So, does any of this matter? Could the world have been more believable with even more subtle movement, like trees swaying in the wind, stars twinkling at night, things that moved as you walked past, or tiny bugs hovering around moss-covered brickwork? Was any of the additional background movement needed at all? Would the game have been as successful or had as much charm if it all looked like this? To kind of strengthen my point, I saw a video of a fan Sonic game. I think it was unfinished and the background and foreground had no animations, and it was all static. If you compare this, you can clearly see the difference and benefit of having this living space to navigate. Fez, at the end of the day, is an intricate, deep, and philosophical puzzle game that requires real-world research and discussion, but it's also a piece of art, with a soothing soundtrack, considered art design, deep lore, and an attention to animation. If the game had been handled any differently, and the environments felt cold and uninviting, then the appeal to the player would have been lost, and the game would have lost its ground. But this huge, clever, calculating, mechanical game is grounded by the feelings of home, adventure, serenity, nature, majesty, and spirit. The harsh mechanic of rotating your entire plane of existence and the heavy themes of space travel and perception of reality are calmed by the appearances of a cat chasing a butterfly, a fox jumping over a dog, flowing water, and children playing in the grass. And this brings me back to my point earlier about the style of the game being deliberately 8-bit and really simple. Because I feel the really complicated narrative of the game and the puzzles involved are balanced by this really simple art style. Complexity versus simplicity. And in a way, it's reassuring that while you're going around trying to save the world by finding these cubes in dangerous places, life continues around you. And hey, that's thanks to some subtle, concise animation and art. Thanks for your comments on the Wonderboy video. Let's quickly look at a few. I mean, wow, thanks to Wonderboy's creators LizardCube for commenting on the video. We got a nice bit of behind the scenes info, which is really awesome and interesting. It was lovely for Video Game Storytime to comment about their mention as well. Cheers guys. Durian Head says, awesome editing. Thanks so much, I am proud of my editing. Brian Kennedy accidentally disliked the video for 4 hours. Sake. Limester wanted to cry watching this video, which is pretty sweet. Ben Williams makes a nice point that though the types of games I talk about don't usually enter his realm of gaming, he still enjoys the videos regardless thanks to the level of detail and discussion. Thanks Ben. Ultra Cactus says that notifications still aren't coming through. Anyone else having that problem? Captain Clogger says, when's the Metroid Prime video coming out? Cheers. I'm doing all the main Metroid games in release order, and Prime will come after that, once I've done my Mega Man 11 video in October, later in the year. Then Zero Mission and so on. So, sorry, you have to wait a little while. Thanks again to everyone who supports my channel by being a patron, following me on Twitter, and by commenting on my videos and subscribing. I couldn't do it without you all. Catch you next time! Love you, bye!